Hey guys, we're going to do our second session of our professional development that is on the new course of study that will go into effect next year. I think you all have a copy of it. Oh, goodness, sorry. Looks like this. So if you don't have your copy of it, go ahead and pause the video and grab it because you're going to need it. I am going to go through this as quickly as I can, but it has some really important stuff in it that we all need to make sure that we're aware of so that we are implementing and focusing on these skills in our classroom. So the first session that we did was on oral language and concepts of print. This session is going to be on phonological awareness. So go ahead and make sure you have your course of study. Just kind of a heads up, you're going to see me look down and read a lot because there are things that I actually have to read verbatim. Otherwise, we'll kind of go through this as quick as we can. We're going to stop every so often and answer a couple of questions just so we can make sure that we're all thinking about the skills, because even though we're not doing it in person, it is really, really, really important that you're aware of the standards and that you are teaching these skills in your classroom. So today's outcomes are to gain a deeper understanding of the alignment between the 2021 ELA course of study to the science of reading, particularly in the content sub-areas of phonological and phonemic awareness, and to gain a deeper understanding of the vertical alignment of grade level standards for phonological and phonemic awareness. So we're going to be looking at all of the standards in these two areas through K and 3. We'll talk a little bit about 4th and 5th. All right, so go ahead and pause this video. Make sure you use your phone to scan the QR code. When the form pulls up, make sure you choose Region 9, and the session is Phase 1, Session 2, which is Phonological and Phonemic Awareness. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that we're signed in, let's look back at our conceptual framework for the course of study. You find it on the cover of your actual course of study. So remember, the conceptual framework is a visual representation that helps to illustrate a body of interrelated objectives and fundamentals. Sorry. It is a visual tool that helps you analyze and gain a comprehensive understanding of the makeup of the 2021 ELA course of study. Oh, goodness. Go back. Okay, so looking at your conceptual framework, remember the inside circle that is kind of a depiction of all the skills that our students are going to need to be proficient at come graduation time. And then the dark red circle around it is, as we build out, these are how we build those skills. So we're going to start with literacy foundations. And then after that, our language arts is broken into 2, reception and expressive language. And then on the outsides of those, you see with receptive language, we're talking about reading and listening skills. And then with expressive language, we are talking about writing and speaking skills. So take a second and think about, where do you think the phonological and phonemic awareness standards would live inside this conceptual framework? All right, so if you chose literacy foundations, you were correct. Very good. Phonemic awareness, phonological awareness, those standards are going to be housed under our literacy foundations within our conceptual framework. So pretty much your phonological and phonemic awareness skills are getting your kids' ears ready for what their eyes will see later. Okay, so if they can hear and manipulate sounds and words and syllables, then when they get ready to actually apply their phonics skills, then they will be much more likely to pick up those phonics skills quickly and be able to use them going from one word to another. So that is why it lives in the literacy foundations. I have to read a paragraph to you just about how this conceptual framework was developed. The development of the K-3 standards was guided by the science of reading, which is the body of research that has emerged from multiple disciplines to discover how the brain learns to read and write and why some students experience difficulty doing so. The simple view of reading and the simple view of writing, Scarborough's reading rope, and Airy's phases of word reading development are only a few examples of the models that guided the development of the grades K-3 standards. All standards align with and fully support all requirements of the Alabama Literacy Act and are written in a way that will help classroom teachers, special education teachers, and EL teachers identify students' lowest level deficit skill or skills and differentiate instructions to meet students' individual needs. So, some of those terms you heard in there: Scarborough's reading rope, the simple view of reading, Airy's phases of word reading development. If you are currently in letters training, you have heard those terms a lot. If you are not in letters training right now, you might be a little bit unfamiliar with it. We talked about them in the first phase of this professional development when we did oral language and concepts of print. But if you're not familiar with them, then when we're done with this, you can go back and kind of check those out. All right, so today we are going to focus on the content area of literacy foundations and the content sub area of phonological awareness and phonemic awareness. Like our definition for the science of reading and everyone having a common definition, it is important that we also utilize common language when discussing areas of literacy with each other and with our students. The Alabama Literacy Act provides us with definitions for phonological and phonemic awareness, which are purely auditory activities. So remember, when we're talking about phonological and phonemic awareness, we are talking about just auditory. So just listening. There is no print or words involved at all. Okay, so take a second and read the definition of both phonological awareness and phonemic awareness. If you were like me, before I did some of my training, I used to use phonological awareness or phonemic awareness kind of to mean the same thing, or at least when I heard someone talking about it, I just thought they were the same. But they're actually not. So phonological awareness is just the general understanding of sound structure. So it's an awareness of speech sounds that includes words, that includes syllables, onsets, rhymes, and phonemes. So it is a very broad category. And then underneath phonological awareness, there is where you will find actual phonemic awareness. So phonemic awareness is the ability to hear, identify, and manipulate individual sounds. But they both should be taught from the most simple to the most complex. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later on in our training. Okay, so here is that broad umbrella that I was just talking about. So we can think of phonological awareness as this big umbrella, which is just the basic understanding of how words are built and the structure of them. And then underneath phonological awareness, you will find rhyming. So underneath phonological awareness, one area or one skill you'll find is rhyming, which of course is words that have the same ending part like cat or bat. So another skill we find under phonological awareness is alliteration, which is a group of words that have the same initial sound, like bat, ball, blue, bear. There's a lot of environmental print that you can bring in for this, like Krispy Kreme, Dunkin' Donuts, Frosted Flakes. Those are all examples of alliteration. So another skill under phonological awareness is sentence segmenting, and that is the ability to segment a sentence into individual words. Then we move to syllables, which are word parts. So under phonological awareness, our students, would be able to segment words into syllables or take syllables and put them into words. onsets and rhymes. So onset is the initial sound in a word, and the rhyme is from the first vowel sound all the way to the end. So if I'm using the word bat, the onset would be b, the rhyme would be at. If I do a longer word like snake, the onset would be sn, and the rhyme would be ache. Oh, sorry, let me move myself. And then we get to phonemic awareness. So we've kind of been building from broad, and now we're moving down to more specific. So with phonemic awareness, we're looking at individual sounds in words. Can we hear them? Can we blend them? Can we switch them? Can we delete them? Can we substitute them? Those skills all fall up under phonemic awareness, and that's what we're going to be looking at today in your course of study. All right, so let's look at our K3 recurring standards. So these are standards that recur in kindergarten, first, second, and third grade. We see them across that entire grade band. So go ahead and grab that course of study and find page 24. And I want you to read through the recurring standards for K3. And as you're reading, I want you to think about which recurring standards are directly tied to phonological and phonemic awareness. And you're not going to discuss, but you are going to type it in the box in just a second. All right, so let's look at those recurring standards. The first one was R2, use knowledge of phoneme grapheme correspondences and word analysis skills to decode and encode words accurately. And utilize active listening skills during the discussion and conversation in pairs, small groups, or whole class settings following agreed upon rules for participation. So remember we talked a few minutes ago, phonological and phonemic awareness are purely auditory skills. So in the recurring standard 1, use active listening skills. In order for kids to be proficient in phonological and phonemic awareness, they are going to have to be active listeners. They're going to have to be able to listen and focus on the words, the sentences, the syllables, the sounds that you are working on when you're using these standards. And then the recurring standard 2, use knowledge of phoneme, grapheme, correspondences, and word analysis. So before they can get to the grapheme part, which is the written letter that matches the sound, the phoneme, they've got to be able to hear, blend, delete, substitute, work with, manipulate those sounds. So the more proficient they are at hearing and being able to manipulate phonemes auditorily, that's a word, the easier and the better it is going to be. The easier it will be for them and the better that they're going to be once they get to that phoneme grapheme correspondence where we're adding in that written part. All right, so sorry, let me move myself down. All right, so we are going to dive deeper into these standards for K3. If we were in person, we would do a carousel, but since we're not, we're going to do it a little bit differently using Edpuzzle. So you are going to read the corresponding grade level phonological and phonemic awareness standards. This is where you can find them all. So kindergarten, the overview is on 24, the standards start on 26. First grade starts on 33 and 34. Second grade, 43 and 45. And third grade, 55 and 57. So I don't want you to just focus on your grade level. I want you to take about 60 to 90 seconds. Start with kindergarten, read those. The standards are super short. And think about what sticks out to you in that grade level for those phonological and phonemic awareness standards. And then we're going to come back and we're going to talk about how it progresses from K to 3. Okay, so now that you've had some time to read through each grade level standards and jotted down some ideas of things that you've noticed, we're going to talk about them briefly. I want you to think about where you noticed the phonological awareness tasks that fell under that umbrella. And then I also want you to think about what are the critical components of the phonological standards at each grade level. All right, so looking at, let me see if I can make myself small enough. I'll just move myself around in a minute. All right, so looking at K through 3. So kindergarten, as I was reading, I noticed it was early and basic phonological and phonemic awareness, whereas in first grade, it was basic to advanced phonological and phonemic awareness. And then second and third grade, it was just advanced phonemic awareness skills for second and third. Under kindergarten, they are counting words and sentences, recognizing alliteration, recognizing and producing rhyming words, counting, blend, and segmenting syllables in words, blending, segmenting, onset, and rhyme of single syllable words, identifying initial, final, and medial sounds in words, and blending and segmenting up to 4 phonemes in words. And remember, this is all auditory, so we're not asking them to be able to read words with four phonemes, but to hear 4 phonemes and produce the word. Okay, so looking at first grade, like I said, we're moving from more basic to more advanced, from basic to more advanced phonological and phonemic awareness activities. Instead of just recognizing alliteration like they did in first grade, in kindergarten, now in first grade, they are expected to be able to produce an alliteration. They are expected to be able to recognize and produce groups of rhyming words. So whereas in kindergarten, you might say, does bat and bear rhyme? And they would give you a thumbs up or thumbs down or say yes or no. Well, in first grade, you might say, what are the rhyming words in this group? Bat, bear, blue, cat. And they have to find the rhyming words or produce groups of rhyming words. So you can see how we're building, getting a little more advanced, a little more complex. In first grade, they should be able to count, blend, and delete syllables. So not just how many syllables are in watermelon, but also be able to blend those syllables together and also to delete syllables. So if I gave them sandbox, sandbox. Well, if I give you sandbox without box, what's left? And they should be able to give you sand. Okay, so that would be a first grade skill. First grade also blends segments up to 5 phonemes, and that includes beginning and ending blends. And that's tough, especially those NT or ND ending blends are really tough for first graders, but that is their skill. So in kindergarten, they were just doing 4 phonemes. Now in first grade, we're doing 5, including blends. So we're building on what we did in kindergarten. First grade should be able to add, delete, or substitute phonemes at the beginning and at the end of a word. They should be able to distinguish between long and short vowel sounds, and they should be able to identify sound substitutions in words with up to 6 phonemes. For example, if you give them the word strips and ask them to change the I to an A, then they should be able to produce straps. So that would be an example of that skill. All right, moving on to second grade. We're getting a little more complex in second grade. And again, remember, these are all auditory skills. So we're not attaching print or letters to them yet. That would be phonics. We're just doing these auditorily. And remember, this is something you can do or should be doing every single day with your kids for like 5 minutes a day. Okay. All right, so second grade is applying knowledge of voiced and unvoiced sounds, like that TH makes a th or a th. So applying knowledge of voiced and unvoiced. They're working on advanced phonemic awareness skills. So they're adding, deleting, and substituting sounds, but in the second grade, we're not just doing beginning and end, we are doing middle sounds as well. So instead of sting, you might add a r after the t and make string. So that's a little bit more difficult for them. That middle sound is harder for them to hear and to work with. Second grade, delete the initial sound in an initial blend in a 1-syllable word. So if you say the word is blend, I want you to take away the B, then they should be able to give you lend. Now, this one is with support, so you can give them a little bit of help. Delete the medial or final sound in blends. So instead of snail, take away the it would be sail. So they're deleting that initial sound, or sorry, the middle or the final sound in a blend. Then apply phoneme chaining that changes only one sound at the time. Some people call these word ladders, like start with the bat, change the B to a K, cat, change the T to a P, cap. So that's word chaining or phoneme chaining or word ladders. And then with support, reverse sounds within a word by saying the last first and the first last. So if you start with tap, to reverse that, the sounds would be pat. So that takes a lot of practice. So that's why in second grade, we're still doing that with support. Okay, now moving to third grade. So if you were like me, so most of my time teaching, I was in first and second grade. And I always kind of thought as a phonemic awareness or phonological awareness. When I was in first, I thought of it as more of a kindergarten skill, because when I was in first grade, I thought, oh, it's all about phonics. We're learning how to read. Phonemic awareness was a kindergarten skill. Once I taught first grade for a while, I realized the better my students were at phonemic awareness and phonological awareness, the easier it was for them to pick up on the phonics. So third grade teachers, I know that you probably think of phonological and phonemic awareness as like maybe a kindergarten, first grade skill. This is really, really, really important for your kids as well. That's why you have standards on them. So looking at your third grade standards, y'all are working on advanced phonemic awareness skills. They are working on deleting and substituting phonemes in the initial and final blends of words. Reversing phonemes in a word. Notice it took away the with support. So in third grade, they should be able to do this on their own, reversing those sounds in a word. Apply phoneme chaining that changes only one sound at a time to a series of words. So your word ladders, your phoneme chains are going to be a little bit longer, maybe a little bit more complex. And then your last one is to substitute and delete affixes to show morphological changes. So remember, affixes are just prefixes and suffixes. So if you gave them the word photograph and asked them to change graph to cell, the word would then be photocell. And so y'all could talk about how changing that also changes the word and its meaning and what those affixes mean. A little bit probably simpler would be you could change pre-read, change pre to re, and how does it change the word and how does it change what the word means? Okay, so changing those affixes. All right, so now that we have looked at all of the standards for K through 3, we're going to look at where they fall in the ERIES phases of word reading development. Okay, so think about or go back and reread, if you need to, the standards that we just talked about and decide or try to figure out what phases those standards fall in or fall under. Okay, so if you look at where our standards fall, the early phonological and phonemic awareness, syllables, onsets, rhymes, initial phoneme matching, those skills all fall under the early alphabetic phase of word reading. Our basic phonemic awareness, which is the segmenting and blending of 3 to 4 phonemes, which was like our K1 standards, those fall under the later alphabetic phase of word reading. And then our advanced phonemic awareness, which was deletion, substitution, and reversal, which was some first grade, but mostly second and third grade, those fall under our consolidated alphabetic phase of word reading. So as you can see, it starts from early and goes all through our consolidated phase of word reading, which is why it's really important that phonemic awareness and phonological awareness are not just addressed in K and 1, but it's also addressed in second and third. So think about, well, let's look at this. So letter names and some letter sounds are early alphabetic. So those are like our kindergarten babies. Some of our first grade strugglers, but primarily the job of our kindergarten kiddos, right? And then later alphabetic, you get an initial set of phoneme grapheme correspondence, which is also kindergarten and then on into first grade. And then consolidated alphabetic phase, we see our orthographic mapping, which is where we get our phoneme and grapheme links, phonograms, syllable patterns, morphemes. So you can see how it builds from K, and then it goes to 1, it still incorporates second grade skills, it still incorporates third grade skills. So it's really, really important, because think about, when do most kids, or when does our curriculum expect kids to be really solid and have mastered all of their phonics skills? If you said third, you were right. So that's why it's important. Kids aren't going to master phonics until they've mastered phonemic and phonological awareness. So that's why it's really important, even in second and third grade, that y'all are hitting these phonological and phonemic awareness skills every single day. All right, moving on. Oh, remove myself. All right, so we've talked a lot about K3. Let's look at 4th and 5th grade. I want you to take a second and just read the first paragraph of the 4th and 5th grade overviews. The page numbers are right there on your screen. All right, so you've taken a few minutes to read over those. Think about what you just read. What do the 4th and 5th grade overviews tell you about the role of phonological and phonemic awareness? Okay, so the last sentence in the first paragraph of each overview, so 4th and 5th, the last sentence of those overviews says, students who will struggle with oral language, phonological awareness, and phonemic awareness should receive intervention and or individualized instructions to close gaps and to develop the expertise needed for reading and interpreting more complex literary works. So our 4th and 5th grade kiddos that are still struggling with this, which is a lot, because honestly, I don't think we've done not we as in Ladonia, but we as in an education system in general, have focused enough on phonemic and phonological awareness past grades 1 and 2. So we probably have, or I know that we have a lot of 4th and 5th graders who have deficits in these areas. If we can close those gaps, that will help them close some of their phonics gaps, some of their writing gaps, and help them become more proficient readers. All right, so now thinking about those 4th and 5th grade standards, go back and see if you can find one standard that is dependent on phonological or phonemic awareness. All right, so hopefully you found at least one that you could match with being dependent on phonological or phonemic awareness. I found a couple in 4th grade. The first standard says to apply knowledge of phoneme, grapheme correspondences, syllable types, and morphological structure to read unfamiliar multisyllabic words accurately, both in context and in isolation. So just in that one standard, they have to be able to apply their knowledge of phonemes, syllables, and morphological structure, which goes back to those prefixes and suffixes that we talked about. So if they're not solid in those 3 skills, then they're not going to be able to master that 4th grade standard. 5th grade, the standard 1 applies phonics and word analysis skills to encode and decode words in grade level texts. So encoding, remember, is where they are hearing sounds and writing the word. So if they're not solid on those phonemic awareness skills, they're not going to be able to encode those words correctly. The second standard was to use combined knowledge of letter sound correspondences appropriate blending, syllabication patterns, morphology, word attack skills to read unfamiliar multisyllabic grade level words accurately in context and in isolation. So there again is all of those skills that we've been working on in K3, phonemes, morphology, blending, syllables, letters and sound correspondences. All of those fall under phonemic and phonological awareness. If they're not solid, it's going to be really, really difficult for them to be proficient readers in 4th and 5th grade. Okay, so K3 teachers, remember your job is really big when it comes to phonological and phonemic awareness. Is really important to make sure that your kids are really solid in those skills. And remember, it's all auditory, and it only takes like 5-ish minutes a day. So really quick every single day instead of a long time, just a couple of days. Do it every single day, and our kiddos will get there. So let's look at the vertical alignment of those standards, K through 3. Okay, so you might want to use the handout if you printed it out, the vertical alignment of the standards handout that I included in the email. That'll make it a little bit easier for you to see it all at once. If you don't have that, it's okay. On the next slide, you'll be able to see all those standards. It's just not laid out quite as nicely as it is on that handout. So we're going to look at those standards, K through 3, in a vertical way. We are going to, if you have the handout, you can underline the keywords. If not, we're going to talk through those and pick out those keywords that show how they're related. And I also would like for us to think about how the expectations become more rigorous at each grade level and what we notice about the standards at each grade level. So we've talked through this a little bit on a couple of slides back, but I wanted to bring it back up. So I've underlined some keywords, as you can see. We talked through this a little bit before, but just as a reminder, remember kindergarten, we're just doing those early and basic phonological and phonemic awareness skills. 1st grade, we're still doing some basic stuff, but we're getting a little bit more advanced. And then in 2nd and 3rd grade is where we're really hitting on those advanced skills. Kindergarten is our most basic. We're counting words and sentences. We're recognizing alliteration. We're recognizing and producing simple rhymes. We're just mostly working with blending and segmenting up to 4 phonemes. And we're blending and segmenting onset and rhyme and identifying initial, final, and then medial. And I think it's interesting they put them in that order. It's a lot easier for them to recognize that initial sound than it is final, and it's easier for them to recognize final than it is medial. So as you're doing those skills, try to progress through that, the initial, final, and then medial. Go from simplest to most complex. And then in 1st grade, we're not only counting and blending syllables, but we're deleting them as well. We're doing words up to 5 phonemes. We're adding, deleting, and substituting at beginning and end. This is when we're working with short and long vowels. And we are substituting sounds in words up to 6 phonemes. So we're becoming a little more complex. And then in 2nd and 3rd is where we really get into those more complex, more advanced phonological and phonemic awareness skills. We are doing a lot more deleting, substituting, reversing those sounds. Of course, if your kiddos in 2nd and 3rd aren't solid on the ones in 1st, we got to go back and shore those up before we can move on to the more advanced ones. But this increase from basic to more complex, it just indicates how our standards are increasing in rigor. So we're kindergarten, getting a little bit more difficult in 1st, 2nd, and then 3rd. So we're building all along the way. All right, so let's think about academic language. So what academic language from these standards is currently incorporated during classroom instruction? So think about what language you're using in your classroom that matches to these standards. Okay, what needs to be adjusted or added next year when this course of study is implemented? I want to take your ideas from this and send it out so everyone can see it. Just so as a school, it's really important that we're using the same language across all grade levels. So when our first grade or when our kindergarten kiddos get to first grade, they're hearing the same language they heard in kindergarten. Same thing when they get to second, they've heard the same language in K and in one. So hopefully by the time we get to third, we're really strong in what words like initial, final, medial, syllable, like what did those mean? I know a lot of us like to use word part instead of the word syllable. And I get it when you're teaching them what it is, but you need to make sure you're using this language that's in the standards also while you're teaching. And there are some concrete ways that you can teach some of this academic language. And we'll talk about those in just a second. On this slide, it says academic language must be derived from the standard. If curriculum materials utilize different terminology, teachers should defer to the language of the standard. So if Reading Street uses the term first sound instead of initial sound, then we need to use the term initial sound. So we're going to defer to the language of the standard. That doesn't mean you don't ever use the term first sound. Of course, when you're teaching them what initial means, you've got to tell them what it means. But when you're talking about it, making sure that we're using that academic language. All right. All right, so just to kind of bring it all back together, this is adapted from Tolman's hourglass figure. So if you think back to the first training that we did on oral language and concepts of print, I showed you that figure that had the hourglass that met in the middle and then it goes down. This would be the top part of that hourglass. So it's a phonological awareness continuum. So we're starting with phonological awareness. We get all the way down to where we get a one-to-one correspondence between phonemes and graphemes. And then the bottom part of that hourglass is where we are adding in the phonics part. We're adding in those graphemes. So early phonological awareness includes skills like rhyming, alliteration, sentence segmentation, syllables, onsets, and rhymes. Then we're going to move into basic phonemic awareness, which would be blending and segmenting, and then moving down to more advanced phonemic awareness, addition, deletion, substitution, and reversal. Once we have mastered this continuum, phonological awareness, now we are really solid on how our sounds are going to match our letters or our letter patterns or our prefixes or our suffixes, those things, and we can start to use that now to apply phonics skills that we're learning. But we've got to be really solid on these. And then you also might remember from our last training, we talked about Scarborough's rope, and it had all those individual threads that wound themselves together to build a strong and a proficient reader. Phonological awareness is one of those strands that fell under word recognition. So remember, we had language comprehension and word recognition, and those two big strands wound themselves together. Well, under word recognition, one of the strands is phonological awareness. So our kids have to be really strong in this if we want them to be a really strong reader. And remember, it's not just job of K and 1. Our second and third grade teachers, y'all got to really hit it as well. Y'all have your own set of standards to build from K and 1. And then fourth and fifth, if your kiddos are coming to you and they have holes or they have that phonemic awareness strand is frayed a little bit, you're going to have to really tighten it up, shore it up to make your kiddos proficient readers. So thank y'all for listening to me, and excuse any of the pauses or errors or anything that I did. But hopefully next time we can do this in person. It's a lot easier to stay engaged and to have some discussions in person than it is. But this time, our time just didn't allow for us to get together in person. So once you have finished the video, shoot me an email, let me know, and then I will bring you the sign-in sheet so that you can get credit for this training. Thanks, you guys. Let me know if you have any questions or you need any other examples or resources I can give you. See you later.